Ciaran, I'd like to talk to you about coolant, if you will. There's a lot of confusion with colours. Colours, numbers, what's it all about?
Okay. Coolants have, just like everything else, like your engine oils, they've evolved over times because of newer technology again, newer metals, aluminiums inside the systems, and with it has brought, a change. So what we normally would have known as, let's start at the beginning. What you had was IAT coolant, which is inorganic acid technology, and that was typically colored blue. And then we moved on to OAT, which is organic acid technology. And what's the difference between the two? Well, the first one will coat a system, but it has nasty enough kind of additives that are in it, like your nitrates and borates and amines. Whereas the second product is an organic acid technology, and it's like a living organism. It stays in solution, and it'll jump out and do what it's supposed to do, or a hot spot it'll sort out. And then what they decided to do was they created HOAT coolants, which are hybrid organic acids. So a bit of this one and a bit of this one. And now we've moved on to HOAT with silicate enhancement and phosphate enhancement, dependent on hard water or soft water. So there's lots of different colors in coolants, but they don't represent what's in. You can have one which is a pink coolant, and then another one which is a pink coolant, and they're all different. So really the specifications that you look at, it's about understanding what's designed for this car, what product goes into this car. And it could be to do with the aluminiums that are in the system, or, the flux material that's in the system. But ultimately, I'll show you a demonstration, because why coolants have become an awful lot more kind of in people's faces. I guess Volkswagen, and every garage countrywide, when I go in, they'll go, how can I fix the Volkswagen problem? And especially in winter when they turn on the heat and there's no heat coming from the car, you see the bottles nowadays, in cars where they're heavily, brown and corrosion, and evident corrosion is happening in the system. You've got water pump issues, and not all of it is coolant problems. Some of it is cheaper components and people buying cheaper components, which is why we like to stick with premium garages that are buying OEM parts, that are aligned with good motor factors, supplying OEM parts, so that you have less mechanical failure, and that the products then that you use align themselves with the OEM parts. So the Volkswagen issue, this is G13. So this is a ready-to-use coolant. So in coolant, what you have is, 80% is, let's call it monoethylene glycol. That's the freeze protection, because antifreeze it gives it away in its name. It's designed to stop the car from freezing. Yeah. But there's a 20% additive pack in that. And that would be your wetting agent, your anti-corrosion, all of the good stuff is in the additive pack. That's what dies in an antifreeze. The freeze protection, the monoethylene glycol, that never loses its freeze protection. That stays the way it is. And the reason why manufacturers will always say a 50-50 mix, and you go into some garages and it doesn't get down to -40 here, Ciaran. We can do a -20 mix.
Yeah.
Well, what they're actually doing is they're diluting the additive pack in that. If you buy a ready-to-use -25 coolant, it will have a compensation package in it, so that the additive pack has been boosted because they've had a reduced mix on the glycol. So most manufacturers will always say a 50-50 mix, because they know it's got the right balance of additives in the system to do its job in a system. Now, two systems, both with the same. So what we're going to do is we measure coolant in different ways. You've got a refractometer, which will give you the freeze protection. Yeah. And like you have in your garage here, you have your pH checker, which checks the pH. So what happens is acid is at one end of the scale and alkaline is at the other end of the scale. And neutral would always be around 7. But in antifreeze, it's actually higher, because you need reserve alkalinity in the system to fight against acidity.
Makes sense.
So we're going to pour in a quick drop of acid into this bottle of coolant. So what you're seeing is crystallization happening in the system. The sand-like substance that you see, the minerals you can see around the top where it's all crystallized.
Yeah.
So the whole system has pretty much crystallized. Look, you can see it on the cap.
Yeah, stop tick.
Yeah, look, as we're letting it go down, it's actually gone into clumps in the system.
It's like a milkshake.
Yeah. So what's happening is silicates are minerals, and the minerals are falling out of solution. Now, we've heavily oxidized it with this. So we may not be able to neutralize all of this, but let's give it a go. So this product here is our Supercool. Now, Supercool has nothing got to do with the freeze protection. What this is the additive pack in the antifreeze, and it replenishes the antifreeze. So if you have clean and bright antifreeze and you check the pH and you've seen that it's dropped down below 8, you can add this as a mini coolant service to the car, and it's going to boost the additive pack. And that'll be good for when you're doing your timing belt and you need to change out the coolant. If you are doing a timing belt, you're probably only changing 2.5 to 3 liters in a 6 or 7 liter system.
Yeah.
So we would always recommend that you add Supercool into a system. But let's see if we can neutralize this. Whoa. So where we had a system which was completely crystallized and the coolant was gone acidic, and you saw all those crystals. Now you can see
it's
it.
just as it settles there, it's just aerated.
It's completely gone back and restored.
The milkiness is gone.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That little bit of whiteness is just the aeration from shaking it.
Yeah, and as we leave it settle, it's completely been neutralized. So you've gone from a completely acidic product to neutralized, and that's good to go. But if you have massive discoloration in the system, I would always advise that you flush the system and change the system. But for the Volkswagen issues, like, that's completely clear.
Yeah.
So it's completely neutralized the acidity that was in the system by simply adding Supercool.
What's important to note as well that acid in a coolant system attacks the elements of the engine. It attacks the aluminium head. It eats aluminium.
Yeah.
Head gasket, seals, water pump seals.
Yeah.
There's so many elements of the coolant system that acid attacks. And then when it gets into a cast iron block, it really advances corrosion, which in turn causes a lot of...
Well, you'll see it in the brown, but you know, since you've got this tester, and since you've been testing the systems, how many systems do you see when you actually go and you test the system?
We don't. It's back to the same, what we've said in all these tests and all these demonstrations you've done. Our customers don't have problems. Anytime we see a brown coolant bottle, in fairness, it's usually in a Volkswagen, sometimes in a Ford, but mostly in Volkswagen. And they're new customers. They haven't been here before.
Yeah.
And the first thing we'll step in with then is recommend a flush, a clean out, and a new bottle. Yeah. Just to make the car look good again. Yeah.
And I think, you know, the silicate bags that are inside in the systems that we see in Volkswagen, an awful lot of mechanics are taking the silicate bags out, and they're blaming the silicate bags on the system blocking and everything else. But in reality, it's not the silicate bags that's actually causing that problem. The silicate is designed to replenish the silicate that's already blended in the antifreeze.
Yeah.
And when you take that bag and remove it from the system, the pH level will drop much quicker. So it's so important that if you are removing that bag or changing the bottle, that you add a bottle of Supercool to replenish the silicate that's in that system. I would always recommend using Supercool because it restores that balance that you're now removing from the car to protect the customer by the bag bursting. If in the event that it did burst, you need to replace that silicate, because silicate is the protection on the aluminium and the flux material inside the system. This product here can be added to all antifreezes, OAT, IAT, HOAT. So there's no complications with the product. It's only going to restore the balance that's needed and, restore like new performance. And that's what we're ultimately looking for.
Probably important to note as well that too much alcohol, either way, the pH scale is bad.
Yeah. So at one end of the scale, you've got your acidity. And only a small drop in acidity, this problem is happening. So when we see it dropping down into the 7s, we know that Supercool needs to go into that system to boost it. But likewise, if you had a system that was up at 10 or 11 and you add Supercool, it can have a negative effect as well, because high alkalinity does the same as acid. Yeah. So it's about having the right balance. And that's why garages need to invest a small bit in the right tool. And like yourselves, when you have a procedure and you're going through your service procedure, you're testing with a test kit. So you know where it stands, you know what to advise the customer, and your team are able to turn around and tell the customer and say, well, we've tested the system. We know where it's at. We know what the system needs to protect you. So you're protecting the customer. Like, no one wants to be told that they need an 800 or 900 euro fix on a coolant system, because, 30 euros, maintenance would have saved them. And the problem that we're seeing is sometimes it's too late to save the systems because people haven't tested. They've neglected the coolant because they thought the coolant was the way it always was. Coolant has changed, with the advent of different aluminiums and components in a car. The coolants have changed, and garages need to change and come to the other side of the fence and start testing. And testing the components and testing the antifreeze is crucial. The same way as you test your brake fluid, the same way as you test your tire depth, you need to be testing the fluids.
I think one last thing to mention, it's so important, and a lot of garages don't realize this. And look, I'll put my hand up, I'll be the first one to admit, it's took me time to realize this, that when a customer comes to you with their vehicle, they're trusting the vehicle to you. When their customer takes that vehicle away, they automatically assume that you've checked all this.
Yes.
So not to be checking this, you're doing an injustice to the customer. The customer wants, if you turn around and say, look, we've tested the pH, we've tested your coolant, we recommend you do this.
Yeah.
Now, it's not an upsell. It's only telling the customer something they actually need.
Yes.
And they're relying on you to tell them.
Yeah.
So what customer is going to turn around and say when you tell them your coolant system shot, you need to go and get a big expenses? Is there no way we could have prevented that? I could have thrown a Supercool into it 2 years ago, but now here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's, and it goes back to what you're doing. When a car comes in to McKeown Auto Services, there's a procedure. It's the same procedure for the brand new BMW as it is for the Volkswagen Golf that comes in. You run through the same procedure, and repetition, and your success is through repetition and the quality. So, where the guys like Evan and yourself start, you have A, B, C, D, and you go through that checklist. And the most important thing is being able to go back to the customer and go, well, we've invested in the technology to test. We've tested your system. We've tested the results, and you need. And yes, not every customer wants to hear the words "you need" or, we recommend that you do this in order to prevent this. Yes, cars cost money. Cars sometimes are neglected because people have run out of money, but cars need investment. The value to the customer is not how cheap you can service the car. The value to the customer, is about what you can do to prevent.
Save them money.
Save them money in the long
future.
Run. Yeah. You want your car to run and last. You got to spend a little, and preventative maintenance is key in all of that. Happy fuel system, happy oil system, happy coolant system and brake system. All of these things are the working components of a car. Yes, you have brake pads, but these are the working components, and they need attention.
And one last thing, again, all these products that we're working with here. The products we're treating, the oils, the fuels, the coolants, they're all lubricants. All lubricants are designed to wear out before the actual product they're lubricating does. And this is why they need either replacement or attention.
Yeah.
And that's just something that's really, really, really important to get across. Some people say, Ashford, I never had to do this before. You really need to remember, folks, when you're changing your lubricants, the reason you're changing them is because they are designed to wear out before the product they're lubricating does. Ciaran, thanks so much for that.
Yeah, no problem, Sean.